Alright, for this screencast we'll talk about the scientific revolution. Alright, so we'll start with the definition here. The scientific revolution was a transformation in European thought in the 1500s and 1600s that called for scientific observation, experimentation, and questioning of traditional opinions. Alright, so transformation in European thought in the 1500s and 1600s that called for the scientific observation, experimentation, and questioning of traditional opinions. Now, so why did this happen? Why did this transformation occur? Here are some causes. First, we have exploration, and expansion of trade. Second, continuing study of ancient authorities. This started with the Crusades and the Renaissance, so continuing to study those ancient sources. And then last, the development of the scientific method. What is the scientific method? The scientific method was a new approach to investigation and discovery. And it has certain steps you have to follow. You can't just think or perform any action and say it's a scientific method. In order to say you're using the scientific method, you have to follow a specific set of steps. You have to identify a problem, form a hypothesis, perform experiments, record the results of those experiments, and then analyze the results. Think about the results. What do these results tell me, in other words? So in other words, analyze the results. So that's the scientific method, and that is the system of thinking that people during the scientific revolution supported and used. So now we'll talk about some famous people from the scientific revolution. We'll start with René Descartes. Alright, here's a nice picture of him. René Descartes. A little bit about him. René Descartes helped develop the scientific method with Francis Bacon of England. So in other words, they kind of worked together to develop this method. He believed everything must be doubted until proved by reason. Alright, so question everything again is his motto, so to speak. Everything should be doubted until proved otherwise by reason. He used math and logic to prove basic truths, and his famous quote that you may hear people use every once in a while was that, "I think, therefore I am." And he used Latin, of course, showing that these people valued and looked back on the time of the ancient Romans. So he used Latin when he originally wrote it, and he said, "Cogito ergo sum," which means in English, "I think, therefore I am." Next up, Nicholas Copernicus. A picture of Copernicus here. A few things about him. Copernicus was from Poland. His famous theory was called the heliocentric theory, and that stated that the Earth revolves around the sun instead of the other way around. The old way of viewing it was that everything revolved around the Earth. Copernicus' heliocentric theory said the Earth revolved around the sun. He was the first scientist to create a complete model of the solar system, and he published a work on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. That was the name of his work, on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres, right before his death. And the reason he waited to publish this was because he knew the church would disapprove his work. So to avoid being punished by the church, he waited to publish his work, where he discussed the heliocentric theory and the solar system. Next up, Galileo Galilei. Here's a picture of him and a little bit about Galileo. He was from Italy. In 1609, he built the first telescope for astronomy. He was the first person to observe Saturn, craters on moons, sunspots, and the moons of Jupiter. In 1610, he published another work called The Starry Messenger. Due to his works and what he believed, like Copernicus, Galileo published his things, but unlike Copernicus, Galileo published them during his lifetime. The church did not approve of his works either, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment as a result. He died in 1642. And then in 1992, in other words, yes, that's not a typo, that's true, 1992, Pope John Paul II declared the church had wrongfully condemned Galileo 350 years after he died. So they condemned him for his beliefs in his published works. And in 1992, the church went back and revised that decision, said that they had wrongfully condemned him. And Galileo, I'm sure, would be very happy about that if he wasn't dead. All right, next up, Isaac Newton. Picture of Newton here. Some information about him. Newton was from England. He published a work, The Mathematical Principle of Natural Philosophy. He also published The Law of Universal Gravitation, where he sought to prove that gravity affects objects in the universe as well as on Earth. And he developed calculus, and also had a plagiarism feud with Germany's Gottfried von Leibniz, revolving around the development of calculus. But Newton was a mathematical genius and used principles of mathematics and applied them to everyday phenomenon on Earth. Why does an apple drop from a tree and hit me on the head when it releases from the tree? Why does that happen? He applied mathematics to phenomenons like that. All right, and some effects of the scientific revolution. It was the beginning of modern science, or the use of modern science, the ways we think of science today. The scientific revolution is the start point, you could argue, of our modern scientific society. Belief in progress and the power of reason grew across Europe. So belief in progress and the power of reason. And then last, a new view of the universe as a well-ordered system became a belief. So there's some effects of the scientific revolution. The next screencast will deal with the Enlightenment. Hope you enjoy.